Anybody, anywhere,
It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen.
This pass caught by Paulsen, the tight end.
And from 106.7 The Fan, Grant Paulsen.
Welcome into Take Command with Logan Paulsen, who spent a decade in the NFL. I'm Grant Paulsen. You can check me out on 106.7 The Fan. And speaking of The Fan, you can watch this show, YouTube channels of 106.7 and the Team 980. We got video. Want to watch the program in high definition? You can do that there. Logan, what's going on? How are you?
We're just getting ready for 36 inches of snow tomorrow. So, getting the shovels sharpened up, getting some salt out, because that's apparently what we're going to get. A little bit of a light dusting.
I'll take the under. It feels to me like the projection for wins for a baseball team just came out at like 126.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't really happen. So I don't know anything. You know more than I do, meteorologist, but that's not going to happen. So,
dude, there's no chance it happens. There's like no way. But think about how crazy 36 inches of snow would be. Like, it's such a large amount of snow. Like, I can't even, like, how does that look in my backyard? Like, that covers my fence. Like, what are we talking about here? Yeah,
it would be wild. The most snow I've ever seen, you were still a Cali boy, so you don't know about this, but the blizzard of 96.
Okay.
I want to say that was 2 feet, like in Virginia and King.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. And I mean, it was debilitating for weeks. Like, we didn't go to school for the better part of a month.
Right.
I mean, it just, no one could do anything. And that was close to 2 feet. And again, we still talk about that. That was 30 years ago now. I was in grade school. So there have been some other really good snowstorms along the way. We had the Snowmageddon right around the 2010 or whatever that was.
Yeah, I was here for that. Yeah.
Good one in 2016.
I got a funny story about that. You want to hear a funny story?
Let's hear it.
So it's, I think this was 2012. So it was like, we got like 15 inches of snow, a lot of snow, right? And my wife is pregnant. And of course, on the night of the snowstorm, she goes into labor. And I've got my little, 2005 Ford Escape, and we're trying to power through like a good 1.5 feet of snow. And so I'm living over in this apartment complex, and I'm like, I don't know what we're going to do. And you know what happened? Got a good buddy living in an apartment right next door. Old Ryan Kerrigan got the Yukon out, and he ended up driving us to the hospital in this, in 1.5 feet of snow. Good Indiana boy getting us out of our lockdown. And my son was born later that night. So it's pretty funny story.
That's
about
awesome.
The snow. Yeah.
So I was going to say, I mean, what you need to do, one, is find a better vehicle to ride in.
Yeah, 100%.
But there's also just a binary difference, too, of a person who has driven in a lot of snow and is comfortable doing it. And I'm assuming you are not that guy. You're not that guy, pal. You're not that guy.
Well, I mean, obviously, I haven't been here for a while. I've got more reps at it. But in California,
that time, like UCLA Bruin Logan Paulsen. I mean,
yeah,
you're like
zero reps, coach.
What is this stuff falling from the sky?
Wait,
Kerrigan,
why is the rain not falling like it
Kerrigan's
should?
like, oh, it's only a foot. That's too bad. It's like ready to go. In Indiana background. That's pretty amazing. But so your kid forever will know that Ryan Kerrigan drove him to the hospital. That's pretty cool.
That's exactly right, man. And dude, speaks to the kind of guy Ryan is. Because it was not like it was like at 4:30 in the morning. It wasn't like 12 o'clock on. You know what I mean? So he hooked it up big time.
Oh, so is that just a text or a call? What is that?
So I texted him, and then I was like, I need help. So I called him, and he's like, hey, what's up, man? And I'm like, hey, it's going down. Can you get us to the hospital? He's like, no doubt. So hooked it up. Hooked it up.
I love that. Very cool. But he didn't get. There's no namesake. There's no Kerrigan middle name. Nothing.
No, but we always jokes like if Owen ever makes it professionally, he gets a percentage of the contract. So.
Okay, I like that.
So we're thinking forward investment here, not just we're in it to win it.
A name doesn't help you pay the bills,
Correct. Not that Ryan needs any help paying his bills. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, he wants a cash deposit. Well, I like that, and we're on our way in hockey too. He might actually have like a defenseman in the National Hockey League here. So
yeah, we'll see, man. I was just reading something the other day, because I do all the sports science stuff, and there was something in there about height and femur length and how it correlates to skating posture, and how really, really tall guys are kind of getting phased out of the NHL because some new skating techniques that they're learning. And so I think Owen's going to be a big old hoss. So he's got to work on his foot speed, sounds like. So maybe more football, basketball, rugby is in his future. We'll see.
Yeah, like your body wouldn't work in hockey necessarily as big and thick as you are. Like you'd be an enforcer. But I mean, there are tall guys like Zdeno Chara was a monster and was
6'9", yeah.
But yeah, like if you look at like Quinn Hughes as an example right now, just scored the goal for the United States of America to get to the semifinals. He's listed 5'10". I just saw him in person up close. And if that guy's more than 5'9", I'll eat your phone. I mean, I bet you. But he is an elite defenseman. It's all about skating and, as you said, moving your feet. And now with defensemen, you don't even want like a stay-at-home defenseman in the National Hockey League. You want a guy that's a puck mover who can get up and down the ice. But anyway, this is not Take Capitals. This is Take Command. So let's get after it. Logan Paulsen and Grant Paulsen today. All right, so I actually wanted to bounce this off of you and start the pod here and see where you're at on this. I am coming around big time on being in on drafting Jeremiyah Love at number 7. Jeremiyah Love is the running back from Notre Dame who is widely considered not just the best running back in this draft class, but he is pretty much the universally considered top skill guy in this draft class. So it doesn't matter who you talk to or ask. Every single draft person that I have asked this question to has had him as their number 1 non-quarterback. Daniel Jeremiah, Mel Kiper, all the big boys have it that way. And so I'm sitting here and I'm going, well, why is that not a consideration? And there is this logic over the years that you can't or shouldn't draft running backs early, certainly in round 1 or early in round 1. And I don't do hard rules anyway. I don't work in Sharpie or pen. But here's my thought. I'll lay this out and get your thoughts. Should the Lions have not done what they did with Jahmyr Gibbs? Game changer. Should the Falcons have not done what they did with Bijan Robinson? Game changer. Adrian Peterson, Saquon Barkley. If this guy is actually really special, what better way to help Jaden Daniels directly than to draft a running back? See what happened in Baltimore when you bring in Henry with Lamar Jackson, or in Philly with Saquon with Jalen Hurts. And yeah, they're not going to be in the gun as much as they were with Cliff, but even if they lead the league in under center stuff, still a running back is valuable for the run game, play action, all of what David Blau's going to do, marrying those two things. But you're still going to be in the gun half the time. The league leading teams under center still are. So that mesh point stuff, I think, gets better, more interesting, harder to defend Jaden Daniels. And then the last point I would make on this is, if you think about it, everything I want to do is about Daniels, but I think it can make the defense better in terms of, their defense was not good 2 seasons ago. They got to the NFC Championship game. But they played a more complementary, healthy brand of football because they didn't leave the field. They were one of the best in time of possession. Last year, I think they were 29th in the NFL. It's a huge problem. You expose the defense. So everyone's going, well, I've got to fix the defense. And I agree with you. But I think this could help fix the defense indirectly. It's the best thing you could do for Jaden Daniels. And if you really believe this player is special, I just don't give a damn if you're a receiver, a running back, a tight end. Are you a weapon? This guy is a weapon. That's what they need, is weapons. They don't have enough really good offensive players. So that's my case for Jeremiyah Love. I'm not saying I would be upset if they did anything on defense, because that's great too. But I would put it on the same level of being excited about Sonny Styles or David Bailey or any of these other guys. A pick of Jeremiyah Love, which everyone seems to just be saying, no, you can't do that. I'm in on that. I want your thoughts.
No, I think I'm in on it too. I think we've talked about it. I don't know if we've talked about it on the show, but I think when you, in this year's draft, right, like when you look at the blue chip, like kind of traditional positions of value, they're just not there the same way. Like there's one quarterback, there's one offensive lineman, maybe 2, right? There's 1, maybe 2 receivers that people would take in the top 10. And that's a very different dynamic than what we've seen the last couple of years in the draft. And so all of a sudden, with that being the landscape, I think it becomes best player available even more. And so, and again, best player available is also, that term is affected by team need, right? The Commanders need running back. They need edge. They need linebacker. They need safety. So I think it's very apropos that the 4 positions that the Commanders need are probably 4 of the best positions in the top 10, right? Sonny Styles, Caleb Downs, David Bailey, Arvell Reese, however you want to kind of parse that out. And then you have, obviously, this running back, Jeremiyah Love. And
do you agree with the logic, Logan? Because a lot of people will push back and say running back is not nearly as big a need as the 3 other. Like one of those is not like the others. Do you agree with that or no?
So, I mean, this is the other thing that's really hard about this conversation is we haven't even done free agency yet. So we might come out of free agency and be like, man, we actually did a really good job signing 2 young edge rushers. We got a good off-ball player who understands the Flores defense, and actually Quan and Will Harris are closer in terms of what we need at safety than we actually thought, right? We might come out of it saying that, and all of a sudden running back becomes a huge need. And the thing about Jeremiyah Love specifically is, to me, it's not, I think running back does him a disservice in his skill set. He is an explosive offensive playmaker. So watching the Texas A&M game last night, and they're running a little bit of mesh, backs on a free release to the flat, kind of a rail, and he makes a one-handed catch, breaks a tackle for a 45-yard touchdown. And I think about that receiving skill set in the same context as like Christian McCaffrey. And if he shows any route running ability, he becomes a third down weapon as well. A guy you can motion out of the backfield, run a choice, run an option route, and find mismatches. Again, like we saw some of that last year with Bobby Wagner in coverage against Bijan Robinson. And all of a sudden that adds layers to your offense. Jahmyr Gibbs, like he is a good runner, but he is a fantastic catcher of the football. And so I look at those traits and those skill sets, and to me, like that adds a layer to this offense that hasn't been here for a couple of years. So in terms of need, in terms of helping the defense, like I think that argument, I understand that argument. You want to possess the football. I just want good offensive football. And if Jeremiyah Love creates good offensive football here for the Washington Commanders, I'm all about it. Now, I think the one caveat here that's important to note is injury history for running backs, right? They tend to get a little bit nicked up. And then all of a sudden, like when people talk about positions of value, quote unquote, oftentimes they're referring to the second contract. So when you draft, Jeremiyah Love, he will become a top 5 paid player at the position when you pick up his 5th-year option. So when that happens, it's like, are you getting the most value for the roster? Because again, like that's extra money that you have to spend that could be spent on, a linebacker, safety, whatever. So that is information to be considered. However, I also think it's extremely important to understand that if you hit on Jeremiyah Love and he is Adrian Peterson, nobody cares, right? Nobody cares. He becomes a dynamic piece for this offense for the next 5-6 years. And that is going to be extremely valuable.
Yeah, right now, if you look at running back AAV and the guys that make the most money in the NFL, right? Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, Alvin Kamara, Josh Jacobs, James Cook, Kyron Williams. Maybe other than Kamara, there's not one team on that list that isn't happy with that player at that number, right? And so I happen to have a philosophy. Again, I try not to work in absolutes. I don't believe in rules in the draft. You can't do this. You shouldn't do that. The team that breaks the most rules in the draft, in my opinion, of positional value and where they do things and how they do things is the Lions. And I would make the case that the Lions are one of the best drafting teams in the league. Because you know what they do? They just go, I really like Jack Campbell. I don't give a damn if I'm supposed to take an off-ball linebacker here or not. He's going to be good. I really like Jahmyr Gibbs. He's amazing, and he's a weapon, and he's fast. He's going to change my offense, and I need him. So, your philosophies be damned. We're going up the board, and we're getting Jahmyr Gibbs. And they just get good football players at a really, really high rate. But, going back to your point on the money, I would almost never spend a second contract on a running back. So I'm going to be spending a little more than I want on the back end of, the 5th-year extension. But the cap's going to have exploded. I think the running back market, which this year we saw correct itself a little bit, went bigger. It probably won't be even top 5 at that point, just because I think that the numbers are going to be skewed that many years out from now in terms of a growing cap. And if you're overpaying a guy who's a good football player for a year or two, that's fine. Now, what frustrates people is I go into this plan almost expecting not to re-sign him. That's just my own paradigm. And you can't take a guy in the top 10 if you don't have visions of him, being around for a long time. I'm not worried about 8-10 years from now if I'm Adam Peters. I may not even be here then. I'm not worried about that if I'm Dan Quinn. I'm worried about a couple of years before I pay Jaden Daniels, making him the best football player possible, helping him get back on track this season, and doing the most for my team in this next few seasons. And that is exactly, I think, what Jeremiyah Love would do. But the second contract element of this is important. And my guess is, by the way, Washington would pay him. I'm just saying that, if he is who I think he is, who people think he is, it's just my philosophy that I generally wouldn't look at the market this year. That's the other argument is you can't draft Jeremiyah Love at 7 when there's that many quality free agents. But do you want to pay a bunch of money for a Travis Etienne or a Kenneth Walker? You're paying more money for an older guy closer to hitting that running back wall than you would be for Jeremiyah Love.
No, I think that's exactly right. I think the thing here is if it's a hit, there's no issue, right? I think that's the thing it comes down to. And I do think this team, we're going to talk about in the second block here a little bit, is I think it's uniquely qualified because of the offensive line and where they're at right now to accommodate a running back. However, I love that you brought up the Lions, because I think the one thing about the Lions is that they encapsulate this perspective is like, you can go positions, non-positions of value, right? So linebacker, running back, they trade a bunch of draft picks and draft a third-round receiver, and Isaac Tesla, who ends up having a really kind of explosive rookie season in terms of catches, like highlight reel type stuff. But you have to hit on the pick. And so like this comes back to maybe the original kind of draft philosophy. Like when you are laying out your board, right, and you're given those draft grades, if you think that he has a higher chance, Jeremiyah Love, of hitting, like he's the pick, right? Because that is ultimately what makes your roster good, is when you get a bunch of hits on draft picks, right? If you have a confidence, like you interview Sonny Styles and you're like, this dude's going to be an absolute monster because he's locked in, he studies film, his dad was a pro, like all these different things, then that's the pick. So I think it's going to boil down, quite honestly, between those four players. Who are you the most confident in that's going to be a good pro for 5-6 years? And I think that's how you got to look at this thing. It's not, again, it's not position of value because, well, Washington said on the offensive line. It's, do we think David Bailey can rush the passer like he did in college? And are we okay with the lackluster run defense? If we are, that's the pick, right? Arvell Reese, a little bit of a projection, right? Because, again, off-ball linebacker, on-ball linebacker, Housie is a true pass rusher. But if we trust the character of the person, we're good to go. And I feel like it's the same conversation as Jeremiyah Love, because when you cut the film on, there's not a lot of questions about him, right? He catches the football right. He does a really good job on, I don't know, just his ability to create explosive plays is unique in this draft. So if he's the best offensive player and you are confident that he's going to hit, like that's the pick.
So, and this is kind of what's won me over as I've watched this guy. I'm not viewing him as drafting a running back, by the way.
Right.
Which he is, by the way, I think going to be an excellent running back. This is an offensive weapon. And, the same people that tell you that you can't draft a running back have no problem taking a receiver. I was talking about this on the air with my co-host in DC, Danny, the other day, and he has no interest. And a lot of people are like this. I'm not calling him out. I'm just saying this is a philosophy where he's like, you can't do running back there. But he'd have no problem taking a receiver. And I'm like, but what if you don't like the receiver as much? He's like, well, he'd still go like Carnell Tate or whatever. And I'm like, no. Just draft the better weapon. Draft the more useful, helpful player. Position be damned a little bit. So that's kind of how I'm approaching this. You said something I want to go back to, though, which was next kind of on my hit list. And in your original answer, you got to this because you're a sharp cookie. But I think free agency is an important part of this, too. So if you are going to open up this possibility for yourself to draft Jeremiyah Love, let's just say behind the scenes right now, and we don't know, but Adam Peters and Lance Newmark and whoever else is heavily involved, Tim Gribble's out, who's run their college scouting for years, so I'm not sure really who's replaced him in that department. But whoever's helping put together the board, let's say that they love Jeremiyah Love, and they're like, this is our guy if he's there. We're not passing on him. This is our fill in the, our B. John Robinson or whatever. Then they need to attack free agency in a way to land on Love. And what I mean is, to your point, you probably need to get a lot of defensive help in free agency. Mm-hmm. They're going to. One of the problems with this 1 year kick the can down the road bit that they've been doing is that all the cap space that they have, which looks amazing when you have $66 million and you're going to free up another close to 18 and a half when Marshawn Lattimore's out. It sounds like they have so much money. But when you need to sign 30-plus guys just to fill out your roster, that money actually goes fairly quickly.
Yeah.
It's not the cap space or the situation you think it is, because as we talked about the other day on the pod, they only have 3 receivers under contract. They only have 3 corners under contract. Like, they just need bodies, and that all costs a couple million here, a couple million there. And when you're doing this 1 year at a time, that's all full money against the cap. So next thing you know, that money goes quickly. But my point is, in free agency, you need to find an edge that you feel good about opposite Armstrong. Because you can't do that in round 3 or beyond. You only have the 1 pick at 7. You probably need to find your corner that you feel good about. You need to find your linebacker that you feel good about. And you can then go into the draft where you get to do what you want, not what you need, right? If I have to eat to sustain, I'm going to eat differently than where do I want to go today? I'm in the Chinese. So free agency has to allow you to do this. And that's why I think they got to have to know if they're into the love game a little bit here, it has to maybe inform what they do before that when they're spending on their defense.
Yeah, and I actually think like when you look at it from a free agency perspective, and I think when you look at it from a roster construction standpoint, this might be the ultimate argument against Love. And what I mean by that is when you look at free agency, like what are the positions that cost the most money? It's receiver, it's edge, right? Running back is relatively cheap. And I think that's where,
by the way, I would say it's the best group of players available this year is running back.
Correct. And so this is where I'd push back, because you just talked about all the cap space they had, right? $66 million. So again, if we're just drafting players, I have no issue with Jeremiyah Love, right? I think like if you got time today, you're at work, you're in between meetings, go cut on a Jeremiyah Love highlight tape. You'd be like, sick. Yeah, let's bring him on down, right? But I think it's
burgundy and gold.
Yeah, but in terms of building a roster for the next 3 years, you got to think about what the draft does for you, and it provides cost control assets. So Myles Garrett just made $40 million or whatever it is. So if you get a defensive end like David Bailey, and I'm not saying they're going to be Myles Garrett or Arvell Reese, that is a cost controlled position where now you can invest that the dividend between, or the difference between $40 million and the rookie contract, which is like $20 million, right, in another position. I can invest in tight end. I can invest in running back, these lower cost offensive positions. And that's where I think the ultimate argument comes back to me. And it says like, that's why you wouldn't draft Jeremiyah Love, because like you said, they got to fill the roster out. And so where are the positions that like have the biggest price tags? It's receivers, right? Receivers right now are making 35, 40 million bucks. So if we can get one at a cost controlled position, it lets us again, build the meat and the skeleton of this roster out with free agency, which I think is an important consideration. And again, these are all issues that stem from not drafting well with the last regime, but this is when you have to pay that check and you have to make some smart financial decisions.
And what you're saying is correct, but the more important thing than setting yourself up with smart financial decisions of where to spend your money is to get football players that are good.
So,
and when you start doing it the way you're talking about, you are implicitly saying that who is the best player may matter a little bit less.
So this is what I'd say to that, right? Is the difference between, again, Jeremiyah Love and Tyler Algier, because that's the name I can remember from the free agency list, or the kid up in New York, I forget his name. What's his name? The running back, number 20. Yeah, Breece Hall. Is the difference between him, those two players, worth a rotational starter at defensive line and a starting linebacker? Is that difference worth that? Because again, what you're talking about is a difference of $20 million. So I can get so that's what, think about Dorrance Armstrong's contract. It's $30 million over 3 years. That's $10 million a year, right? A starting linebacker is going to be about $8 million. So I can get a rotational starter and a starting linebacker for the difference of cost if I go with a different position in the draft. Like that's ultimately the crux here. Is Jordan Love the best player in the draft, or Jeremiyah Love? Probably. Right? But is he on this roster worth two other starting positions? And I would argue that maybe he is, but the answer, just from a statistics standpoint, is probably no.
Right. The only hole I would try to poke in that, because I actually think what you just said is the perfect way to look at it. And it's just arguing with the tree in the forest. But like Breece Hall's arguably the best running back available and is going to get paid a ton of money.
Yeah.
That's not the comp. I like Algier better, or like one of these guys down the board. So like, because I don't think if you're signing Breece Hall, then that actually blows everything up, because why are you spending that much on a running back? If you're going to do that, it actually makes sense to draft the running back because he's cheaper. Because I actually think Hall's going to get paid good money. But we're talking about like down the board RBs who might have a little more baggage. So, you know, like an Algier is the comp between him versus, you know, a pick at 7 here in Jeremiyah Love. And there's also, we haven't gotten into this, but like they do have Bill, who they drafted. I know it was a 7th round pick last year, but has flashed and shown some things. We were very high on him. You know, Chris Rodriguez. So there is some guys at the position that you like. There's a couple other things I want to get into, including a paradigm on offense versus defense this offseason. So let's do that next. It's Take Command, Logan Paulsen and Grant Paulsen. Welcome back to Take Command. Make sure you subscribe, rate, review this podcast, leave a comment, do all of that stuff. We're always looking for questions for mailbag, so you can drop those in the comments tab. Our producer, Evan, will grab those for us. You can also send them to us on social. At Grant H. Paulsen on Instagram, Twitter, all those things. Logan's at Logan Paulsen NFL. So getting back into the idea of the possibility of Jeremiyah Love at 7. So there's two other angles of this I want to hit. The first is comparing him to the defenders, right? I do think the way this draft's going to work out, with Mendoza being a pick, probably one receiver going and one tackle going, it would be really, really low percentage to assume that none of the quote-unquote top defenders that we keep talking about are going to be there. So either Bailey or Reese may fall into their lap, or Sonny Styles or Caleb Downs. All of them aren't going to be there, but one or two of them might. And so just the idea of drafting Jeremiyah Love probably gets a lot easier if all those guys are gone. But I do wonder if one of them is staring you in the face, and this goes back to what did you do in free agency, like Styles versus Love, or let's just say Bailey versus Love, does make it a little bit more complicated.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that I'm gonna like. So I was doing a show the other day, and one of the guys was like, "Who would you take?" And I was like, "Of those 4 players, like I'd be extremely happy with any of them." I think when you have to compare them across and say like Sonny Styles versus Jeremiyah Love, and you have to actually make that decision, that becomes a little bit more challenging. Or Arvell Reese versus Jeremiyah Love. Like I think that's maybe where my bias comes in, is because right now I would kind of layer it in terms of need for the Commanders. I'd probably say edge is going to be a priority. And I think Arvell Reese could be special. I think David Bailey could be special. And so because that is a position of value, intrinsically in my mind, I go, well, I'm going to lean that direction. And again, because I think those are really good football players. I think they're going to make a difference for this team. And then you kind of say between Jeremiyah Love, Sonny Styles, and Caleb Downs, again, positions of not value, what direction would you go? And in that conversation, I would go Jeremiyah Love kind of in a heartbeat, because I just think he would add so much to this offense. But again, like if you went Sonny, there's no wrong answer there. But again, like that's the interesting part about it, is for whatever reason, when you take the 2 edge rushers out of it and you're kind of 3 positions of traditional non-value, it's like Jeremiyah Love just seems to make so much sense there.
So it feels almost like this is Shark Tank, and I'm pitching something to you, and I'm trying to convince you. One other area, and this is more just me giving my paradigms, and I want your reactions to them, and you to coach me up on some of these things. But here's the other way I've thought about this. Again, 2 weeks ago, I probably said it on the pod, I ruled out Jeremiyah Love, like you can't do that. And the more I watched him, I'm like, you know what? Yeah. Actually, you can do that. Yeah. And I think the way that I view it is what you just said. Like, there's 4 or 5 guys that I'd be completely fine with. There's 3 or 4 guys that I would love. He's one of them. And if they take Bailey, I'm elated. If they get Caleb Downs, I feel really good. If they take Sonny Styles, I'm jacked up. Like, it's going to be hard to screw this up on draft night. Now, the player has to be good, and if they don't pan out, you screwed it up. But on draft night, when you put your head on your pillow, there's like 4 or 5 things right now that could happen that I would feel great about. And Love has become one of those, I guess, is how I would count how I'm feeling. But here's the last point I would make. I care so much more about the offense than the defense. I think what is happening this offseason is because the defense was so egregiously bad, we are over talking about how important it is that they build up this defense. We are also doing this podcast at a time where the Seattle Seahawks just rode their defense to a Super Bowl with Sam freaking Darnold. Not to be disrespectful, he's a pretty good player, but like that is changing the math, it seems like, for everybody. And I don't know that it necessarily should in this league the way it is built right now. I point to 2 seasons ago. Everyone acts like their defense was much better or like pretty good 2 years ago. It was not. Their offense was so great, and they made more plays. They took the ball away more, which I'm confident they'll do with this defense now. I don't care if the defense is really good. Like, yeah, if I could touch a button and I could be Seattle, I would do that. But right now, this moment, what I care more about is Jaden Daniels' offense and getting back to looking more like 2024. And so my point is, I would rather lean into really focusing on the offense. Supposedly, I was talking to someone who's a coach in the league about a week ago. One of the things they said was the thing that they really liked about the way Washington went with their defense is they're like, you don't need to have like as many great defenders with that scheme. Well, let's take advantage of that then, right? Like, let's scheme this thing up. I'm not saying you don't have any really good players. Go sign a green dot. Go make some moves. But let's go get Isaiah Likely or Jawan Jennings or both, and then draft Love. And let's have Jaden Daniels compete for an MVP award and the number 3 offense in the league and see where that gets you when you're number 3 in time of possession and helping your defense out in a complimentary way with David Blau making sweet music as the next Ben Johnson. Like, so I am of the belief that there's a little bit of over-talking about the defense right now. The offense is the point. This league is about offense. Everything's geared toward offense. So I just want to get your thoughts on any of that.
I mean, I think that's a really compelling argument. So there's a bunch of different ways to attack this. So first, I'll start off with a couple case studies where teams have invested a lot on the offensive side of the football and neglected defense. The 2 main examples that come to mind are the Cincinnati Bengals and the Dallas Cowboys. Again, the offenses are prolific. Offensive line's very good. They're able to push the football down the field. They've got all these playmakers. You need to get a competent level of defensive production, right? And so I think the point you brought up there about Durante Jones is huge, because I do think one of the things when you watch the scheme, it's not like there's a bunch of studs on that side of the football, right? They have really good football players. I think they have a good football player at every level of the defense, which is, I think, Minnesota, which is one of the reasons where you're like, maybe you need to upgrade at edge. Maybe you need a playmaker at the middle level, linebacker, nickel, whatever. And then they had a playmaking safety in terms of Harrison Smith, right? So they kind of had 3 dynamic pieces, but I don't think anyone would say Harrison Smith is a top 10 safety in the NFL at this point in his career, right? The 2 linebackers they had, I don't think anybody can even name them, but they were really good for that system. And then the 2 edges that they had, I think are good players, but I don't think anyone would say they're top 10. So again, the scheme is going to elevate. So I understand your perspective. Like, this is a good scheme. That's why you bring it in, because it does this to the personnel. But you need to ensure a certain level of competency on that side of the football. And so what does that look like? To me, you need to add blue chip players, right? Because we did this thing where we did pencil, pen, Sharpie for the defensive side of the football. And there aren't a lot of pens and there aren't a lot of Sharpies on that side of the football, which to me is the same thing as saying blue chip, red chip, no chip type of player. And so that's where I would say defensively at 7, like that's why I kind of lean that way, because it allows you to get a blue chip player to supplement whatever you do in free agency. Now, your perspective on the offense is not wrong, but I do think that there has to be a floor to the defensive side, because the other thing that I think about with the Seattle Seahawks and how they did their thing, and again, we're talking about the best defensive football, so this is probably not achievable in an offseason here in Washington. But the thing that does is it insulates Sam Darnold. It basically says, we're okay punting the football. Sam Darnold, you don't have to be a hero. When it's time to make that big time throw in the red zone on 3rd down, you can do it. But the defense is going to insulate you. So when we punt, we're going to get the ball back. It's not like a sieve where they're just going to run right down the field and score. So it allows my quarterback to be a little bit more conservative, be a little bit more intelligent. So I do think, again, it's this weird balance where it's like, yes, you want to support him offensively, but also if the defense is just a paper bag, he has to put the Superman cape up every Sunday and throw for 350 and throw for 3 touchdowns, totally. which is cool. But as a young quarterback, a guy we're trying to keep healthy, a guy we're trying to rebuild, rescaffold a little bit, I think we just need to make sure that we're not over investing in one side here and basically saying, hey man, we think you're a stud, because I think he's a stud. He could definitely do it, but I want to make it as easy as possible for him. And I think you need competent defensive football play for that.
Love that. Like, making it easy for him is getting great weapons around him, to me.
Yeah, it's true.
Right? And that's offense, right? So, but your point is correct. Like, you don't want it to be on him to go out and win 37-33 every single week, which was the case at times in 2024. You mentioned the Cowboys and the Bengals, and they are, if this goes badly, what it looks like. Right. Where Joe Burrow can go for 4,800 yards and 42 touchdowns and miss the playoffs. But I would argue that is the extreme of, like,
it is the extreme
ineptitude and incompetence. And I think if you're inept on either side of the ball in this sport, you're screwed, right? I'm not suggesting that. Like, my comp would be the Bears this year.
I was going to say San Francisco too, right? Like,
well, that's the second one I have. Right. San Francisco this year actually ranked 24th in yards per play. They were 20th against the run. They were 22nd against the pass. But you know what San Francisco can do? They were I think they were second to last in picking balls off and dead last in sacks per pass attempt. Yeah. But, like, they messed around, and if they were healthier, they're a Super Bowl contender. Chicago is my favorite comp because I think you can be bad on defense and make plays. Now, again, that's a hard thing to do.
It's a good point.
Chicago was so good at taking teams away, number one in the league this year by far. But they were the 29th ranked defense. They basically same yards per play allowed as Washington this year. They gave up. Washington, it was 384 yards per game. The Bears, it was in the 360s. And yards per play, it was 6.0 to 6.02. It was the same. The Bears were worse against the run than the Commanders, believe it or not. And in the past, it was very comparable. But they were number one in interception rate, despite not even being in the top 20 in sack rate this year. So, that's a team that is a miscommunication away from the NFC Championship game. Washington was in the NFC title game 2 years ago. That's in your conference, kind of back-to-back examples. So there's a lot of ways to land the plane.
Yeah, and I think that Bears analogy is excellent, right? And I think one of the things about Durante Jones and his defense that's so important is it encourages variance, right? It encourages pressure. It encourages turnovers. It encourages interceptions. It encourages errant throws. And so what you're describing there, I think, is, well, if we get a 80% version of the Brian Flores defense in Minnesota, right? Or even if we get, a version of the Zimmer defense when he was in Dallas or when he was in Cincinnati or when he was in Minnesota, that defense is encouraging variance on third down specifically. And if you just increase the fader, like we talk about percentages and analytics here all the time, if you increase the turnover percentage by 10%, you are a excellent defense, right? Where, again, you might give up a lot of yards, but you're going to get turnovers. You're going to put the offense in position to be successful. So I think there's a lot of ways to do this, right? And I understand supporting him offensively because I think you want to, right? I think that's important. One of the things I was thinking about while you were talking is would the Commanders take an offensive lineman at 7? And I was like, to your point, maybe it helps Jaden Daniels the most to have, a stud left guard or whatever. And we'll talk about that more later. But, supporting the quarterback is extremely important is the point of that kind of digression. But you need to get some type of competency on defense. And it doesn't need to be great, like you're saying. I think, like you said, San Francisco was in the 20s in a lot of those categories. And the Bears were bad in some categories. But they were able to get a lot of turnovers, put themselves in good position to be successful. And they were able to support the offense in that way. And I think that's what ultimately I'm talking about. Because like you said, that's the best case scenario with a kind of poorly manned defense. The other way is Cincinnati, which is a non-tenable solution. But I do think we're kind of saying the same thing. There's different ways to get to defensive competency in this example.
The Lions this year were 18th, middling defensively. Last year, by the way, when they were the 1 seed and got shocked by Washington at home because they turned the ball over 5 times, they were 27th on defense last year as the number 1 seed in the NFC. Now, someone could say, yeah, they gave up a ton of big plays to the Commanders and lost because of it. And that's true. They were super banged up at the end of the year. But they also went for 500 yards. And if they don't turn the ball over, including a pick six, 5 times in that game, literally, Jared Goff, they're probably playing, certainly in the NFC title game, we know, and maybe in the Super Bowl. So I just think that we were very much prisoners of 5 minutes ago. And we're Seattle's defense, the Rams defense. And it's yeah, you can't, that is definitely a way to do it. But Washington is to me, how do I want to say this? They're 70% of the way in another direction than doing the defense being really good.
I see. Yeah. I see
it's you want to turn the car around. They're close to, in my opinion, if Daniels is who we think he is and who everybody says he is, they're a lot further down the road of the awesome offense, you would think, than there's Seattle over there. Let's do it that way. Let's turn the car around and go defense. You're starting from scratch. They have no good players. Why?
I think to your point, they're one offensive playmaker away, good offensive playmaker away from being a really good offense. And defensively from being a top shelf Seattle level defense, you're probably 4 blue chip players away. And I will say
and that's 7 players probably who are helpful away.
Correct. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's a long road to get to one as opposed to the other.
And I got a couple years of Jaden Daniels' contract before it explodes. And I'm saying this is really going to now be crazy. Just you think what I've said so far is too much. A off season where my big moves are Jawan Jennings, Isaiah Likely, and then I draft Love. So I've got McLaurin and Jennings and Likely and Love. And I just go all in on Daniels having this incredible season, this offense being great. Now, again, that does not mean that I want to have the 32nd ranked defense. But I'm banking first on the fact that I'm going to hit on some of my smart, sharp 1-2 year deal guys on defense. You got to do that. And then 2, the Durante Jones factor of let's do this thing like they did in Minnesota where we make good really good, where we make, subpar par. So that would be a big part of it. We should talk about the offensive line, too. You've teased that a couple of times. That's something that we wanted to chat about today, and we'll explain why next. It's Take Command, Logan and Grant. Welcome back, Take Command. So I wanted to talk about the Commanders' offensive line because I saw some numbers come out on X, at Grant H. Paulsen, at Logan Paulsen NFL there. And they were interesting to me, Logan. So basically what this was Daniel Roteman, who covers the league I think he's with Scout NFL. He posted the pressure rate allowed by position in the offensive line, groups in the NFL. And he had Chris Paul 5th at 3.18% among left guards. He had Sam Cosmi 5th among right guards at around 3.3%. Laramie Tunsil, by the way, not surprisingly, did better than both of those guys in his ranking. Tunsil ranked 3rd in the NFL in pressure rate. Now, I know that that's pass pro, not run stuff in terms of the Jeremiyah Love conversation.
Yeah.
If you think about it, you've paid Biotis, who's got a year left at $10 million or whatever. You just drafted your right tackle, who I think we both think the arrow's trending up on. The conversation about the offensive line in town never really matches what they are and have the chance to be, in my opinion. This group was not a detriment. This group was not bad. This group was pretty darn good for much of last year. And I think they could be really, really good moving forward. They're in a great position with 80% of their line intact under contract to have a great year.
No, I think you're 100% right. I think Laramie Tunsil played really well. And I know people are like, oh, they don't have a second round pick. Like the trade didn't work out. I mean, that trade is about as good as it could have gone, I think, for them in terms of finding a franchise left tackle, things that are impossible to find in free agency. And I think you look at Cosby coming back from the injury. I think you look at Connerly, where he's at. You mentioned Chris Paul, what a revelation he was at the left guard spot. And I think that's kind of one of the interesting, underlying storylines of the offseason here is, what do you do there? Do you say, oh, we want to re-sign Chris Paul, or we're okay with Brandon Coleman stepping into that role? Or again, I was just talking about, do you say, hey, we want the best offensive line in football, and you go bring in a free agent, a kind of a priority free agent, or you draft somebody to fit that spot, which would be really interesting. But I do think that group feels like the backbone of this team. And when you look at good this is again, you look at good offenses in the NFL, good offenses, top shelf offenses, they have top shelf offensive lines. And it's because they can run the football, they can pass protect, they protect the quarterback, they can protect the running back. And so that's one of the things that I think another argument maybe against going running back at 7 is it's such an offensive line dependent position, and you have a good offensive line. I feel like you could not plug anybody back there, but a less talented piece than Jeremiyah Love and still get great production. So I'm really high on this group. I can't wait to see what Connerly is in year 2. Cosmi, again, another healthy season under his belt. It just seems like the arrow is pointing up emphatically for that group. And man, I really just can't wait to see what that group does in 2026.
I can't imagine you have any issue with being able to hand Laramie Tunsil all the money, right? I mean,
no, I don't know.
Massive extension as soon as you can do it.
I remember I was talking to somebody about San Francisco's offense last year. This was 2 years ago, and they were really struggling badly. And I was like, what's going on there? Everyone was healthy. Kittle was healthy. Purdy was. This was kind of in one of those weird stretches where everybody, all the offensive skill players were healthy. And the guy immediately, without missing a beat, he's a really smart offensive guy, was like, they don't have their playmaking left tackle. And when you look at what teams
left tackle is so
and I know that's a funny bit, but when you have when you again look at Tristan Wirfs in Tampa Bay, look at Penei Sewell in Detroit, you can put that guy on an island. He can win one-on-ones in short yardage, moving people off the spot. You can pull him to the perimeter. It does so much for your offense in terms of unlocking kind of the you get your base offense, but then the details, situational football, third down, winning one-on-ones, it's a huge element to successful offensive football. And I look at what Laramie did last year, and he delivered on that emphatically in the run game and in the pass game and on the gadget screen stuff. So to me, I'm that is a significant piece. Whether it's at right tackle, left tackle, I'm not here to say like left tackles are more valuable than right tackles, but that is an awesome piece to have, and it makes it so much easier in those gotta have it moments to insulate the other elements of the offensive line through scheme. So I'm pay him what he wants. Like, I'm sure he's, like they're going to work their contract formula and get him layered in where he needs to be layered in. But he had a fantastic year last year for the Commanders.
If you look at Laremy Tunsil, he's going into the final year of his deal. He's 32 this football season, and he's going to be making 24.9 against the cap, which is actually a bit of a discount based on the performance. He's going to want new money because he doesn't have anything guaranteed beyond this season. So this is a McLaurin situation where either you pay him before camp or you would have a holdout that lingers into the summer. I'd imagine this is the ultimate no-brainer where they don't play games here and you just like, this guy's a fringe all-pro. He got completely snubbed when it comes to Pro Bowl, certainly, although that doesn't matter anymore because Shedeur Sanders made the Pro Bowl and all-pro, right? But he's one of the 5 best left tackles in the league. So what are we doing here if you're not willing to pay that guy, especially after you gave up a bunch of picks for him? McLaurin, you inherit, not that he's not a really good player, but he's not like AP's guy. This is AP's biggest, best move since he got here, was trading for Tunsil. So it should just be such an easy nothing burger to now pay him. In San Francisco, even with those guys like Trent and anyone that they've paid, normally it does go into the summer for whatever reason and into camp, and they wait until the end. So we'll find out if that's kind of how Peters is going to play it. My guess is that the Tunsil thing happens fast and easy, and there's not a whole consternation there.
What kind of money do you think he's going to get? Is it like 2 years, 67, or what are we talking here? Probably a little bit more than that?
I would think – do you think you could get him on a 2-year deal? I would think he's going to want more term than that.
So he's a smart dude. And usually those offensive linemen, especially when they're playing as well as he play, they want shorter term. I think the team would want to get him on a 3, again, because it helps the cap situation. You retain him for longer. But I just was thinking knowing – what little I know of him and how smart he is with his money. I was just curious if it was a 2 or do you think it's a 3-year deal? I don't know. So just want to get your thoughts.
If he I would have thought just to up the guaranteed money at his age. You're saying because he's 32, he's going to want one more bite at the apple, Trent Williams style. And by the way, think about what Logan's saying here. We're talking about McLaurin and they were dragging their feet. Well, their point they would make is at that age, receivers start to slow down. That's not how left tackles are viewed. I mean, when you look around, these guys can still play at a very, very high level at 34 to 36 years old, which means another, for him, 3, 4, 5 seasons. So Logan's even saying he may want to do a shorter deal to get back into the market to put his hand back out in a couple of years. I was thinking it would be 3 years, honestly, at the top of the market money, which is right now AAVs at tackle. You've got Slater at 28.5. Trent at 27.5, Charles Cross at 26.1, and then Christian Darrisaw at 26.
Okay, so I was a little high there with that number, actually. Yeah, so that makes sense, yeah.
So I could see something like, 3.85 to 90,
right?
Something like that.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
You guarantee him in part of the third year, it'd be over. I don't know. The first 2 years would obviously have to be guaranteed, but whatever it takes to get him done at a league market level, I'm in on. It's going to be expensive. I'm in on doing that.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're preaching to the choir here. It's funny doing this show with you because I feel like we agree on a lot of stuff and definitely agree with you on this Laremy Tunsil thing too. Because again, if his play was just that good last year, right? And like you're saying, he's at a position that tends to age very well. And so if you can get him under contract and have that difference maker on the offensive line, I think that'd be huge for this group.
All right, so then the last one on the O-line that I would ask you about, because you're set with Tunsil, Biadasz, Cosme, and Connerly. What do you do at left guard? How much are you willing to spend on Chris Paul? Don't you think there's going to be a market for him after how he played?
I do think there's going to be a market. I just don't know what the market's going to be because sometimes guards, it's a really funny offensive line in general is a really funny market because the second people see any type of positive play, they tend to overpay. So he might mess around and make, he might be like a 3 for $50 million guy. Like I have no idea. Like, or he could be a very team friendly.
So wacky, by
but
the
like,
way.
do you remember?
No, I know what you're saying. It happens.
Like who's the guy?
Like, get 17 mil a year, and you're like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah, like Tomlinson a couple years. When I was in San Francisco, we signed a guy, Tomlinson from New York, and he was okay. He like good player. But he made, I think it was 4 years, $60 million. And I was like, Lakin Tomlinson, thank you, Evan. And so, yeah, like you're just like, holy cow, man. And that's why offensive line is so valuable, because if you see any type of positive play there, you're going to get paid. Now, he might be totally fine with 3 years, $25 million, and that would be great. Let's get him back here 100%. I just have no idea how the league sees him, because I thought there was some times where he looked just incredible. There's also, a couple misses, a couple strikeouts, and that happens with offensive linemen. So I just don't know what the monetary value, like with the left tackle with Laramie, it's very clear. Like, this is what he is, top of the market money, boom, give him that, right? The Paul thing is just such a wide range. So if I'm Adam, I probably make him an offer, and if he doesn't like it, I'm saying, go check free agency. And if you make a lot of money, great. But if you're not, this is the offer that we're going to give you. Come on back, and we'll get you back in the building.
He's also fascinating, and I've struggled, like when I try to guess at contracts, I have no idea what to do with him, because if you look at, like, it's hard with O-line, which is why I like, when you watch the tape for us, but like the metrics on him that we have at our disposal are really good from a pass blocking standpoint, and they're actually really bad from a run blocking standpoint, which I don't know if it's fair or not.
Are you using like PFF real quick? Are you using PFF for that?
What's that?
You're using PFF for that?
Well, they're one of them, but I mean, any kind of win rate thing, like ESPN's run block win rate. But to give you the PFF numbers, and then I want to hear your point on it. They have him as the 78th ranked guard out of 81 in run blocking grade. 78. Yeah. Now, from a pass blocking standpoint, they have him 5th out of 81 guards. I don't think he's a top 5 pass blocking tackle. I also don't think he's a bottom 3 run blocking guard. I don't think he's a bottom 3 run blocking. So I'm not saying this is gospel, but like teams are using this kind of stuff, and they're at least looking at it, and they're putting this into the algorithm and whatever. So you've got this idea out there from the people that grade this stuff that like he's really good in the pass game, but really bad in the run game. His overall was like 73 of 81 guards. So it's hard for me to assume he's going to go break the bank. I know he started a lot better in some of these grading stuff than he finished. And I'm not trying to make it the end all be all, but my point is just it is a mixed bag. It's not like ascending rock star. It's like 7th round pick who's got some good and some needs improvement on the tape.
No, I think that's right. I think when you look at him, I think there's and I think also one of the things that I'm excited for David Blau in terms of him coming in is how it's going to help this group be better, right? One of the things about being in the spread is you lose elements to the blocking surface, right? And that doesn't sound like a big deal. Like you lose tight ends, you lose fullbacks, you lose receivers because we're always spread out. But one of the things those pieces on the perimeter allow you to do is it allows you to create better angles on double teams for offensive line. And so in the spread stuff, sometimes it's just tough, man. Like the way, like where they have to go, how they have to get there, the footwork they have to use, the amount of run stunts they get because they didn't run a lot of outside zone. They didn't attack the perimeter at a high level. Like it just made it hard for those guys. So I'm encouraged by David Blau in terms of saying like he'll help with some of that stuff. But to your point, like if that's the metric you're using, and I think there are things to support that metric. There are things that I've seen from him on tape that go against that metric, and I think it's probably somewhere in between.
And I just get a direct thought from you on why is he rated so poorly as a run blocker? Like you don't see it that way, do you?
No. So I think again, one of the reasons I talked about that is because the challenges of running the ball in spread is you see a bunch of really hard looks. And so one of the things that stuck out to me is like just looking back at the first Dallas game, for example, like he's in a combination, right? And the picture is one thing when the play starts, but they're bringing like this nickel pressure, right? So the end stunts. So he's kind of soft on the double team with the center, right? He has to then bounce the defensive end that's looping while Laramie's pushing out. Like people look at that and say, oh, that's fine. That is so freaking hard to do. Like I'm on a double team with my eyes at the linebacker. I feel this late and I'm kind of like half catching it. Like, so he ends up getting a minus on that play because the guy makes the tackle. But like, that's not fair, right? That's like a really hard position to put him in. And again, the type of run game that they deployed, that happened a lot. You know what I mean? So I think like, and that's nobody's fault. Like every system has pros and cons. That's one of the difficulties of running a spread run game system is you get this movement. You gotta really be on your stuff. And you're seeing more guards have lower grades in general because of all the movement teams are presenting defensively. So I think there's hard things that he had to do last year. I think he played pretty good. And I just have no idea how the league's going to value a kind of a guy, like you said, that's ascending in certain areas, looks the part, physical play strength, because the league does crazy stuff with offensive linemen. Like, what was that year? That was 2 years ago with Carolina, where they paid both those guards.
Dude,
like,
that was so wild. Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Like, I think it was more than 2 years ago, but maybe you're right.
It was Bryce Young's like second year in the league or whatever.
Yes.
So
3 years ago. Like, let's just spend all the money on these guards who are okay.
Yeah, and you're like, cool, like those guys are good players, but like I wasn't expecting them to make like it was like 4 years, $85 million, and you're like, cool, love that.
Yeah, you can do that if you want to. Before we go, Spot Track. Evan dropped this into the chat. So they give you the contract or market value is what they say, but it's essentially a prediction on what a guy could get. And this is, again, I would say this about PFF grades, any kind of numbers I throw out there on the pod. None of this is gospel. It's just information, right? But they say for Laramie Tunsil, the market value would be 4 years and 116, which is right around 29 per, which is kind of what we were talking about. But they're saying, a 4-year deal, which I actually think the team should be more inclined to do. Would
love that. Yeah.
Because you can kick that down the road. If you're Tunsil, by the way, I know what you're saying where you can put your hand back out. This guy's battled a lot of injuries recently and just like been banged up. I would not look that gift horse in the mouth necessarily. Like, I'm not guaranteeing that 2 years from now, I'm going into this a fringe all pro. Am I definitely 2 years from now in that boat? And what is my health situation? So if I could get, if you're talking about 116 million, you're talking about close to, I don't know, 65, 70 million in guaranteed money or something possibly, or 60 plus million, at 32 years old, that might be one last big bite at the apple, might be better than two okay ones. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's a good point.
And by the way, he reps himself. You know this, but people may not. He does not have an agent who's going to negotiate this. Like, Laramie does it himself. Yeah.
And again, really smart dude, really good with his money. Like, so whatever he wants to do, he's going to find a way to get it done. But and that always, I think, is an interesting element to these negotiations, because you can't negotiate with a player the same way you negotiate with an agent. So it makes these interactions a little bit more difficult. Like I have an agent, I'm really close to him. He's like one of my good friends. And it's really funny hearing him talk about contract negotiations, because it's like he has to buffer a lot of what the team says to him, right, before it gets to the player. He like filters the negative feedback out before he gets to the player. And so here you lose that kind of sounding board, which makes these always a little bit tougher.
There's an element of like baseball arbitration. Where, for people that don't know how that works, like the player says, the agent for the player says, this is what I'm worth. And the team says, this is what we think you're worth. And then if they can't agree to something in the middle, they literally go to court where a third party decides who's right. And there's no splitting the money. So there was a situation where the best pitcher in baseball this year, this lefty from the Tigers named Tarek Skubal, his agent was like, he's a $32 million pitcher. And the team was like, no one's ever gotten more on that as a pitcher than like 20 million in arbitration. We're just going to give him 19 million.
Right.
And so then they go to court, and it's not like you can get 26. It's like you're either going to get 19, the team wins, or 32, you win. He actually won and got to 32. The team looked like fools.
Wow.
But imagine that. And you have to sit there as they just say all the reasons why you're not worth 32 million.
Right. It's the same thing here. Same thing here, for sure.
Yeah. All right. That was fun. Take command. Logan Paulsen and Grant Paulsen to kick off another week of pods. We've got them coming out 3 times a week now. Appreciate everybody checking us out. Thanks for watching and listening. We're back in just a couple of days.